What's up guys, it's Dunmere, and in this video I'm going to talk about how to counter Zaku Melee in your games. So, to do this I'm going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the character, talk about what makes it powerful, what is exploitable about it, and then talk about who you should be playing to exploit it and which character you should avoid playing against like powerful Zaku Melee. And then we're going to talk through some examples as I play as Zaku Melee just to show you how I could be countered and what it feels like playing as a Zaku Melee and having people play against you. So, getting right into it to start off, we're going to talk about what makes a character strong. So Zaku Melee is extremely powerful in certain circumstances and very weak in other ones. What really makes it strong is the ability to cleave through multiple people and hitting multiple people. Now, his primary fire only does 85 damage, so you're not doing a lot. Even if you're cleaving into a full enemy team, you're only doing like 510 damage, I think the number is, right? 510 damage per swipe. That's like good, but that's into 6 people, and that doesn't really happen realistically, right? So, what really makes that powerful is the ability to get a little bit of chip damage in, but the real thing is charge his rage ability. When Zaku Melee does get its rage up, it becomes like a super powerful little demon. Since it has 2 dashes, it has the ability to chase down suits like Sazabi, Jim, and other ones that have only 1 dash, and cleave through their shield and dash through them and just completely destroy them. That's what makes it really strong in like a standard version. It also is pretty good against other characters too, just because of the fact that whenever it's slashing and moving around, its hitbox is wiggling a lot. Like its head like moves from left to right like that, really like dramatically as it's swinging. And so that makes it really hard to hit. So you have to be careful about that. And obviously all of this goes all the way up into it using its ultimate. Its ultimate is obviously extremely powerful. And when it does end up slapping you around with its ultimate, that's really the main reason everyone thinks it's so horrifying. If it doesn't have its melee ult up, or if it doesn't have its ultimate up, it doesn't have its rage available, then it's really not that powerful. And honestly, it just kind of looks intimidating, right? Like, yeah, I can walk up into you and slash you and hit you with its shoulder bash, but it's only doing like 400 damage with that combo. And in that time, you can poke it out, which is probably why sometimes if you're playing against a Zaku Melee, you're feeling like it's both strong and not strong. If you're playing a character like Sazabi, you're gonna feel like it's really strong. If you're playing a character like Exia, you're gonna feel like it's just like, why does it exist, right? Yes. So, moving on from that, what are you going to want to do to counter it? You're going to want to play from it from range and just pump as much damage into it as possible. The main strength that you have against a Zaku Melee is the ability to just poke it out. If it gets knocked down to like half HP, 500 HP, even if it uses its rage and gets that up an additional 500, it's not enough for it to survive very long. If you've ever seen a Zaku Melee try and ult at like 600, 700 HP, they usually die during that time period. Like shortly after. Like maybe they get a kill, but oftentimes they just end up taking a lot of damage and dying. And the same thing with their rage ability. They don't get like, there's no real like consistent healing in this game. So unless they're being like pocketed by a Metis or something like that, they're not really going to be able to maintain that sort of powerful aggression even if they get their rage up. So yeah, and really with that you're going to be wanting to focus on, very similarly to how it worked with Barbatos, if you watch my other video where you always want to like swing wide away from them on corners when you know them they're there and things like that. You want to play in areas that are really nice and open that it has to run into, and then you're going to want to just pump as much damage into its face as possible. Now when it uses its survivability and turns blue, stop shooting it. All right, that is a time where it's trying to farm up its ultimate or its rage bar, and you do have to kind of understand that this character can't engage if it doesn't have its rage or if it doesn't have its ultimate available. So if you don't give its rage and you pay attention to when its ultimate's coming up, you can basically counter the character pretty sufficiently. So like I said, play range, pay attention to what its rage is at, if it's been taking a lot of rage, potentially has it, and just don't let it get too close to you, right? And I know it sounds a little bit simple and it's difficult on certain maps, but on maps where there is open expansive areas, just play in those areas, like on high grounds and things like that where it can't really get to you. So that's like the core step of how you should play it. Pump damage into its face and stay away from it, right? Or pump damage into its face until it uses its survive, and then wait until it's about to end and then pump damage into it again. Like then throw your cooldowns, then do whatever. If you're playing Zaku Melee against a Zaku Melee, you can like bash it right as it's coming out of its survivability, and like the hitbox of it kind of has like a latent period, so it'll take damage still. So right now, to do this sort of stuff, you have to keep in mind, if your character wants to play ranged against them, you can't play, or if you want to play ranged against a melee Zaku, you can't play a close range character. So you really want to be avoiding playing characters like Sazabi, right? Sazabi is the biggest, it gets countered the most by melee Zaku. Sazabi doesn't do well at all. Jim doesn't do very well at all. Barbatos is kind of like, doesn't do well either. It can kind of just have its one-shot combo blocked. It's not like, it doesn't get hard countered so much as another character does, but it's gonna not do too well into it. Things like Ashimar are really, really good. RX-70 Gundam's always good into like anything. Metis is pretty good because you can fly away from it. That sort of idea. Just whatever gets you distance and whatever lets you effectively play from that range. So, that's really what you want to be thinking about. Get as far away as possible, play a character that's effective with that. So when I play Sazabi and I'm playing against a good Zaku Melee, I either swap over to Marasai or I swap over to Zaku Melee myself, right? I don't really want to try and play Sazabi into it. Sazabi is pretty vulnerable, and since even though it's my best character, you kind of just don't really win that matchup at all. You can, but if it gets its rage up, you're dead, just because of how it gets so quick and it moves so like rapidly and its hitbox so hard to hit, and it's thin. So don't try and do that, right? Now, but moving on to characters that you really, really do want to play into it, there's a couple. The most powerful option is going to be like a Turn A Gundam. Turn A Gundam is very effective against it. Marasai is really, really effective against it. And you have another option like Exia that can stun it out of its ultimate. So the reason I chose these two is because of two reasons primarily. The first one is that they're capable of dealing damage at range, or they're decent at range at least in Exia's case, but primarily is that they can stun things. So with this, what it essentially lets you do is it lets you plan on how to beat its ultimate. Melee Zaku is strong if it gets its rage up, and it can be intimidating against like a Sazabi or like a Jim, but if you're not playing those, it's not that big of a deal. However, when it comes to its ultimate, that's what people hate, and that's what kind of absolutely destroys everybody. So if you play a character that has any sort of stun, you can counter it, and these characters are ones that will be able to hit the stun most consistently. Turn A Gundam can hit it very well if the melee Zaku tries to go for it. Marasai can hook it, but the one that's going to be the most consistent is with Exia, right? Just because Exia has a much bigger hitbox on the stun ability. So what that's going to look like is you need to be thinking about when the character's ultimate is coming. Now, I haven't been talking very much about like ult tracking and stuff like that, because I don't think that's quite at the point where everyone is yet. But what you can essentially do is just before a fight, take a look at the enemy and think, hey, which ultimates did I see them use? Did I see them use this one, this one, this one? Okay, well, I haven't seen them use these other ones for like a fight. That means they have them, or they're coming up pretty soon, you know, like they're at 70%. So in that situation, or especially if you've seen like two fights go by without the ultimate being used, that's the time to get ready to use your stun against it, right? It's essentially because Melee Zaku's ult is so powerful, it's worth it to save your whole time and your whole resources into just countering it entirely. And while, you know, I wouldn't recommend doing this all the time, and I wouldn't recommend like giving up the opportunity to get a few kills on the enemy to do this, but in a situation where, like, you know, you're playing on defense, like let's say you're playing Exia on defensive harbor, and you're like, oh hey, this Melee Zaku has its ult, it hasn't used it for 2 matches, it's definitely looking for it, and you see homeboy start running into you, well, you know what, it's probably time to start charging up your punch, you know what I mean? Like, if you see it go off, if you play like a little bit of that range that I talked about, and then you get ready to hit it with that punch, charged ult or charged dash ability to stun, then you're going to carry your team. Like, I know it happens sometimes on accident, like there's been times where I pop my Melee Zaku ult and I get caught by it, and I'm pretty certain usually that was an accident. It's like an Exia dashing from my corner, but if you think about this, you can use it very effectively. Like I was saying, with Exia, you can use it on a target, like on a Melee Zaku that doesn't go for you, you can use it on when it goes for you, and it's pretty easy to hit. With Turn A Gundam, it's very reliable using your grab against it, only if it already is going for you or like in the general region, right? But for Marasai, you can hook it at any distance, in any range or whatever, but it's a lot harder to hit. And if you're too close to the Melee Zaku, its spinning will hit you and push you and make it really hard for you to hit consistently. So Exia is probably the best one for this one. Now, having said that, these 3 are not the only characters that you can play against it. Any character in the game that has a stun-based ultimate, so we're looking at like Zaku ranged, Ashimar, Marasai, feel free to throw it at them, right? So feel free to play in like a very similar situation. If you're like an Ashimar, instead of going for like a flank or flying above the enemy, play like within the core of your team and wait for the melee Zaku to do what he wants to do. When he shows up and starts doing his little Beyblade spin to win, just punch him in the face, bro. It's worth it. It is worth it for sure to do that, right? I know people kind of have this stigma against solo ultimates, but solo ultimates are very effective, especially in this game when it's a guaranteed kill. Very, very, very powerful to use. So take advantage of that, right? And any character that has the ability to do that, like a Barbatos can be quite effective with it. A Barbatos slashing through is very likely also going to kill it. It does 800 damage per slash, so it's not like a one shot, but that is enough damage for you to kill it. Now, if you're not a person who has that sort of thing, you can, or has a stun ability, you can do the same sort of planning, right? So say I'm playing like Pale Rider or something like that. When I'm playing Pale Rider, I can take a look and go, oh, hey, like what is the big deal ultimates I need to worry about in their team? Like, yeah, they might have like a Sazabi ult and like a Gun Tank ult or like a Unicorn ult. Or just other ones that aren't a big deal. But like just things like that that you don't have to like prepare for essentially. Because like, oh, Sazabi ulted, time to play more behind cover, stuff like that. Oh, Unicorn ulted, time to kill it or hide. You know, it's not like, it gives you time to think about it. But like Zaku ranged ult, Zaku Melee ult, Turn A Gundam ult, some of these other big ones, Ashimar ult. If you can predict that they have them and they get really close to you, like they're looking really kind of sus, then you should be prepared for that, right? And know that maybe it's time to dodge or ult them or stun them, right? So that's the core of that. If you don't have the stun though, in general, just understand that it's time to dip when they're getting close to you and they don't, and you think they have this ultimate, they have the Melee Zaku ultimate, and pump damage into them. Even if you're going to die, just pump damage into it. I recommend people, you know, like dashing to the sides away to split away from your team while shooting it. If each player on your team, like if there's a group of 4 that he's attacking, if each player in your team is able to deal 300 damage, that's enough to kill it, you know, from full health. So oftentimes it'll be less than that, especially if it like has to approach and you poke it down a little bit, you know? So that's really what you got to be looking for. It's always going to be a little bit of a losing situation just because it's so powerful and there you do have to play so weird to like plan ahead for that. But yeah. And honestly, also you can even do this earlier on in a fight. If you see a Melee Zaku in the same sort of situation, like, you know, it has its ult, blah, 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 all that time, and you're like, oh, he's really looking for his ultimate, and we really, really need to win this fight. Just go ahead and toss an ultimate into his face earlier. Like, solo ult him, guarantee a kill, and then you're okay, you know? Alright guys, so now I'm going to run through a little bit of gameplay as Melee Zaku, just so I can show you guys like what I'm trying to do as a Melee Zaku player and how you can use that against me, right? So going back to like the strengths and stuff like that, obviously my strength is close range, stuffing people in choke points where they're going to group up and let me get a lot of cleave, but I am really, really weak to long range. So yeah, while I'm just sitting here chucking, you know, little fire strikes down here to try and get this, I can't really do anything to the enemy from here, right? So what you got to do is you got to take advantage of that. You have to be aware of playing through the high grounds and stuff like that. So since we don't really have anything that can do a lot of damage from the high ground, they should push you there. It's going to put me in a worse position where going through here is going to give me like a lot better of a method of fighting them, essentially. So every single fight, like assuming, you know, the fight's like just beginning or whatever, you have to be thinking about like the fact that the Melee Zaku really, really, really wants to charge up the rage ability. Without the rage, I'm hitting you with a wet noodle. I'm doing 85 damage per hit. It's honestly pretty pathetic. You know, like as you can see, I'm just tickling that dude. But when I get my rage up, things go kind of crazy. So you need to like kill me basically before I can get my rage, or at least poke me down low enough that even if I do end up using my rage, it doesn't really matter. You know? So as you can see, these guys are pushing through the high ground, and that's going to make it a lot harder for me as a Zaku Melee player just because of the distance that they're naturally creating because of that. Now, you can see basically what happened here is, you know, we somehow got pushed back really hard, which is, I don't know, right? And when they did push us back, it put extra damage on me, right? And so when I finally did get my rage, I only had like effectively 600 HP, right? And that was enough to let me be blown up immediately afterwards. Like I said, I know it's pretty alone, but the concept's the same, right? If you get him low before, like as early as possible and before the fight starts, like you'll be able to deal like a lot more value. So in the same way about distance creating stuff like that, someone on their team needs to go left. Like this is good, and I have no idea how he managed to hook me from behind that corner, but whatever. But this is the idea that you want to do. You want to go to a place that's more open, so it creates an off angle on me, so that you're all not just walking through one single choke point against me, and that's gonna give me a lot of problems. If something flanks on me, like a Pale Rider, a Marasai, or whatever, it's really hard for Melee Zaku to deal with it because I don't really deal enough damage to do it. And so you can kind of just poke at me from range and just kind of laugh at me as I regret playing this character for that 10-second period, you know? Now, when I do use this little survivability, which a lot of people will use just to get charge, don't shoot me, right? Don't shoot me. I know it's kind of intense and a big deal, but just don't shoot Melee Zakus when they're in a situation like this, you know? They will end up getting way more charge, especially if you hit them with like an ultimate or something like that, and they'll get their rage. Wow, the feed is real today. Did I kill him? No. We're gonna lose this one. It's kind of looking rough. But a Melee Zaku will also lose to getting pushed by a lot of enemies. So as you can see, they pushed me multiple times, like as a group of 5. Like my team has gone off and fed both times, so they're Omega dead. But I was able to take advantage of that. Now we're gonna see. I think I might do my ult here. I think I'm probably okay. I'm trying to win this game too, right, guys? But I wanted to give you a good little demonstration of what this character can do and how it can be countered in like a higher setting. But it's all gonna be about, as I've been talking, maintaining distance, not letting them charge their rage over nothing. When they do get their rage up, or when they're vulnerable, or really any time, just click on them as much as possible. Like they will die. Like I know it looks kind of scary and they move really quickly and they're shining red and stuff like that, but you have to put damage into them. And you really need to try and put damage into them as early as possible. People don't really heal very much in this game. And if you have to run off or wait until your stuff recharges as a Melee Zaku, you're very likely going to be getting in trouble. Now, how could they have countered me in that situation? Well, one, it's really difficult, right? So don't get me wrong, like all this stuff is difficult. But what they needed to do is the Marasai needed to think, hey, Melee Zaku's got his ult. I should do something about that. So the Marasai in the situation needed to be ready for me, right? And needed to hit me with that ultimate right as I ult, or early if you see a good opportunity, right? And just take one for the team with the ultimate there and just trade. It's definitely valuable on this character because my ultimate is like the second strongest in the game behind Tourney Gundams. Yikes. And don't get me wrong, guys, it's hard. It's a silly character, it needs to be changed. And we don't really have anything that can deal with this Melee Zaku in their team. Like our Sazabi can try, but like you don't expect your Sazabi to hit that hard of a skill shot just to you know, stop it. It's just not really gonna happen very consistently. It's difficult. Oh my gosh, things are getting intense, boys. So, it's basically about like not poking too much against a Melee Zaku, because if you just sit there and like kind of brawl at me a little bit, you're charging your ult, I'm charging my ult, we're trading HP, but I'm also charging my rage, you know? And the more I charge my rage, the higher chance you have of losing. So, you don't want to let that happen, right? So basically, like when you're playing against the Zaku Melee, you really want to be like snappy, essentially. Like you want to like identify them, identify where they are, and then don't let them see you very long before you start shooting them in the face, right? And now this can be like at range too. Oops, I fucked that up. This can be at range and stuff like that, right? Like You can be sitting here and then a melee Zaku shows and you start bullying him a lot. But you just have to be like very aware of like doing it in a situation where you'll be able to blow him up. My team just loves feeding so much, man. I probably should have tried to hold my ult there to secure a win, but speed drive is activated. Now I go back to my how to counter Barbatos video. All right. Oh, touch. So, like I said, it can be hard, but if you're playing with a buddy or something like that, and you're playing against a melee Zaku, if both of you do it and you remind each other, right? You're like, oh, hey, dude, he hasn't used it for a while. Hold your Marasai hook, and I'll hold my turn and grab. You know, that can be like enough that you could maybe one or two of you will get it. You know. Because, like I was saying, you basically just have two things you need to worry about. The first one is the ultimate, the second one is the rage. But you only need to worry about the ultimate when they are, you know, about to use it, right? I think this guy might be... He needs to die. And in these mid-fight situations, where things are going kind of wild, you do really want to try and focus him, you know? Like, just be thinking, in these sort of mid-fight situations, like, oh, melee Zaku has his ult, even if he doesn't, and just go as hard as you can on him. Shout out to my little Sazby buddy here. He's a viewer of the channel. Homie, Discord homie too. But anyway, getting back into things. So now things are going to be a bit different playing on attack, right? Or really, you know, now that you're actually in defense, right? Because I'm playing against you. So what you really need to be paying more attention to is how you're taking advantage of the sight line, the sight lines and such. So right now, like you're not in a vulnerable situation against like me as like a melee Zaku player, right? Everyone's standing on top of me, it's rough. But now that I am in a position like this, you never wanted to let me get here in the first place, right? So you need to stop me. You need to be like, oh, they're gonna have that melee Zaku again? Let's find him before he like actually, before he engages on me, you know? And let's bully him. Poke him in the face. Only has 1200 HP. Like before the rage shows up, you only have 1200 HP. And you have the job of having to like melee tank in front of people without the 27 movement cooldowns of Barbatos. So same sort of thing, right? You know that I want to get on top of you. Now, obviously, I don't want to do it. Ooh. I don't want to do it right now. But you have to keep in mind that, like, you want to be poking me, like, as much as possible before I get to you, essentially. Because if I'm... Oh, this is such a terrible... What am I doing? But you want to know, like, you want to get to me as soon as you can, essentially. And seeing me, like, if you wait around that corner till I show up to then go for me, you will end up losing a lot of times. Right? Dang, man. Again, we should have been holding some ults for that. You know? We should be playing some different characters, really. But I should have trolled my ultimate. But, so, like right here, someone needs to be playing over there to poke me out before I even get to them. They're playing like kind of okay, like they're peeking a little bit, but they're only peeking from one little corner, so they're just gonna end up taking like a bunch of damage and dying, right? But you really don't want to be standing in little choke points like this all the time against me. It's not good. It will end up with you guys getting rolled by me because I'm close to my rage already, and I'm pretty full health because I'm able to like protect myself essentially. Something that is good to do also is think about like, do I already have my rage? So for example, like if I like did something like took a fight against you and I ulted the fight before, there's a very high chance that I will already be there's a very high chance that I already have my ultimate, you know, or I'm sorry, I'll already have rage. If I just used my rage from last, or my ultimate from last fight, and I didn't use my rage, that means I already have it. So this whole like me going slow kind of stuff, that's not the case this time. I'm going to go super hard immediately as soon as I can, and I'm going to make sure that you're not able to like have that time period of safety before the fight goes on. So yeah, look for me early, keep in mind where I am, poke me out in the face as much as possible. When you see me in games early, when you see my position early, you want to always poke a melee Zaku out. When you like are constantly thinking about whether they have their ultimate or not, save your own ultimate to counter it, or if you don't have your own ultimate, save your cooldowns to counter it, right? And stay with your team if you're a character that can stun. Because even though you're not getting a lot of value playing Exia within the core of your team, you'll counter the ultimate and it'll be really, really good. Also, shout out to the getting -100 plus 57 every game. Cool design, Bandai. If you're looking for some more Gundam Evolution videos, then make sure to check out my mobile suit guides. I made one for all original to 14 mobile suits, and I did a Should You Main Guide series also, covering the same mobile suits and talking about whether you should actually main them in Gundam Evolution or not.